Hi there. My name is Gabriel Panaya, and I love music. So much so that each of the past 5 years I've listened to 100 albums and ranked my favorites at year's end. Listing and reviewing those has exposed me to so much wonderful art from so many wonderful artists, genres, and time periods, but for 2022, I wanted to take things to the next level. So I set the goal of listening to, among others, 100 albums from this year, with the intent of putting together a proper top 10 albums of 2022. What I ended up with was more fulfilling than I could have imagined, and I've tried to convey as much in the following list. So without further ado, for the first time ever, here are my... Let's really kick things off with one of the year's most highly anticipated releases. Kendrick Lamar, living legend and steward of Compton's rich hip-hop tradition, ended a 5-year hiatus with the release of his 5th studio album, filling us in on what it's been like for the best in the game over this intervening half-decade. It's been a busy time. Lamar won a historic Pulitzer Prize for his 2017 LP Damn, topped more than a few Best of the Decade lists with his 2015 magnum opus To Pimp a Butterfly, and became a father, having 2 children with his longtime romantic partner. For its part, the rest of the world kept busy too, as the COVID-19 pandemic, Black Lives Matter movement, and 2020 election cycle defined the comorbidity that plagues this seemingly perpetual news cycle. Fans and critics alike waited for the foremost figure in conscious hip-hop to address these woes in his work, and the apparent silence from his camp felt deafening. Of course, this only intensified expectations for the next Kendrick album, and excitement for the impending release of Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers commenced with his 5th installment in the Heart series of album preludes. The album comes to us in 2 9-track halves and deals with a breadth of issues on Lamar's mind: generational trauma, current events, his relationship to each of those, while it keeps the weight of its circumstances and expectations as its constant companion. Kendrick sets an introspective heading for the record on the opener United in Grief, and he continues this line of thought on Worldwide Steppers, as the scene is set. Ensnared by child-rearing challenges which he once experienced from the other side as a kid himself, Lamar endured a 2-year case of writer's block and had to face underlying trauma which would go on to shape the rest of this record. Father Time details Kendrick's complicated relationship with his dad, the hero of his last album's dramatic closing narrative on Duckworth, and We Cry Together is a reenactment of its downstream effects, realized with the help of a compelling performance from Taylor Page. Crown and Savior process the messianic struggle that has defined Kendrick's discography, along with the closer Mirror, and Kendrick makes familiar use of religious allusion here, as well as on album highlight Purple Hearts, a standout jam amongst a sizable chunk of chart-friendly cuts on the album, and ends the record's first half on a high note, beginning its strongest stretch. The singles N95, Die Hard, and Silent Hill don't meet the high bar of critical and commercial synergy set by some of Kendrick's classics, but it's worth noting the record is confident in its melodic direction and goes over far better than the singing on Damn. Much has been made about the dead naming on Anti-Diaries, and while acknowledging the valid criticism therein, I'm inclined to give a wide berth here when the verses in question make an effective artistic statement and seem to have their heart in the right place. The build and climax of Count Me Out is one of a handful of effective musical moments, including the Purple Hearts and Savior instrumentals, as well as the harrowing refrain from Portishead frontwoman Beth Gibbons on the arresting Mother I Sober, the deepest incision into generational wounds on the record. There are certainly ample moments, both lyrical and musical, on the album to impress me, but I'll admit, Mr. Morale is far from my favorite Kendrick Lamar project. Rich Spirit, the title track, and both interludes feel slight to me, especially when stacked against their counterparts on earlier releases, and the scattered thematic focus and lack of a musical identity stand out in comparison to Good Kid and To Pimp a Butterfly. But this is more a testament to the incredible quality of Kendrick's discography than an indictment of Mr. Morale. No doubt myself and plenty of others will eagerly await his next steps from here. In internet parlance, the abbreviation ASL refers to the age, sex, and location of the person behind the keyboard. In a digital chat room, say, a user might prompt another to provide this information, giving them an idea about the physical person with whom they're speaking. But to what ends? Asks Ari Lennox with a wink and a nod on this, the sophomore LP from the R&B singer-songwriter. The first female artist to sign to J. Cole's Dreamville label, Lennox earned critical acclaim for her 2019 debut, Shea Butter Baby, and scored a soulful, raunchy feature on Jasmine Sullivan's Hotels. She cites Minnie Riperton as an influence, drawing both musically and lyrically to ponder sexual liberation in the contemporary dating scene with a talented set of pipes. In her voice, she finds another comparison, Erykah Badu, especially on the album's opener, Plenty of Fish, in which her nasal delivery and sultry instrumental connote the queen of neo-soul. I love the hooks and harmonies throughout this cut, as well as those on other deliciously indulgent cuts like Blocking You, Mean Mug, and Hoodie. More energetic numbers keep the memorable hooks flowing, Waste My Time chief among them, as well as the cheeky Pressure, Defiant Outside, and the smooth, reflective closer Queen Space. But the album is at its best in the bedroom, where we find alluring tracks like Stop By and album highlight Leak It, a shameless celebration of nudes featuring a very capable vocal companion in Chloe. Even the playful Boy Bye qualifies, though the main attraction there is the lovable tete-a-tete between Lennox and Lucky Day. True to its title, the album sees Lennox the songwriter navigating treacherous waters in the modern dating scene, examining the ways in which technology can exacerbate the challenges of finding the right partner, for life or even just for the night. Lennox has said the record grew out of her personal experiences, struggles with dating apps, discovering and being true to herself, and ultimately learning self-love and self-reliance. It's a conceptual journey that runs from her thesis in the opener, through the brief ASL interlude, and closes with an actualized Lennox toasting the worth of her personal kingdom. With a solid thematic through-line and enticing music to match, I'd be surprised to see Ari Lennox needing to drop her age, sex, location in any chat rooms anytime soon. A collision of influences defines the work of London-based Afro-funk band Ibibio Sound Machine. Lead singer Eno Williams, of the coastal Ibibio people of southern Nigeria, carries forward the culture and heritage of her family in her art, while the band's founding trio of producers, themselves enthusiasts of Golden Age West African funk and disco, help Williams to advance the genre into the future, surrounding her mixed-language lyrics with ample guitars, horns, and drum and bass. In the end, the group tallies 8 members, hailing from Nigeria, Ghana, and Brazil, in addition to the band's British origins. For this, their 4th studio album, the group enlisted UK synth-pop veterans Hot Chip as producers and keyboardists to bolster a more electronic sound. Their past 3 records had certainly featured electronics, but for Electricity, the band foregrounds these elements to great effect, and we hear their impact straight away as the album makes a sprightly entrance on the opener, Protection from Evil. The driving groove and playful dissonance build, punctuated by Williams' Ibibio lyrics, before she delivers the titular incantation, and the track erupts into a flurry of intricate rhythmic horn hits. It's an exemplar of the group's entrancing combination of Afro-funk and futuristic synth-pop. The album's best moments check one, or more often, both boxes. Casio locks fuzzy synth flares and injections of Ibibio lyrics into its energetic drums, while the cultural roots that inform the lyrics of 17-18-19, Truth No Lie, and Oyoyo bleed into the rhythm tracks themselves. The slick Wanna See Your Face Again and Something We'll Remember sound radio ready, while the euphoric chorus on All That You Want charts one of the album's high points. Afoken Doko Mien, just about the only respite from the project's thoroughly danceable energy, is a warm, welcoming change of pace. And does Williams manage a snarky reputation of buzzwords from an African perspective on the title track? I like to think she does. I'll admit, I'm not yet at a place where I don't occasionally run aground on the language barrier while trying to engage deeply with the Ibibio Sound Machine, but I find it hardly hampers my enjoyment of the music, as well as my resonance with the emotions conveyed by Williams' varied and impassioned delivery. The record concludes with a melodic cut, Almost Flying, before again ratcheting up the intensity as cries for freedom to rain down wrap up this 48-minute LP. It's futuristic, energetic, funky, and engineered to perfection, and I feel lucky to have been shocked this year by the electricity that courses through Ibibio Sound Machine.
It sound like catfish blacking with hotter summer put up on my baby mama make her go back bend.
What's good? My name is Tobechukwu Dubem-Wigwe.
And I'm fat.
Meet Toby Nwigwe, Houston rapper, actor, activist, entrepreneur, and certified wife guy. He's got 7 LPs worth of back catalog, a Grammy nomination this year for Best New Artist, and in my view, one of 2022's most enjoyable hip-hop records, with the exuberant Moments. A brisk half-hour celebration of his Southside H-Town roots, monogamous devotion to his wife Martisha, Fat, and Wigwe, and faith in the face of hardship. His bombastic personality shines through on these 11 tracks, supported by varied flows, clever witticisms, and thrilling trap production whose creativity rises to meet that of the rapper in question. Opener Round Here Part 1 and Get a Little Bag explode out the gate, taking the energy from 0 to 60 in an instant, while the choruses on Catfish Blackened with Grits and Mini-Me hit those same highs with memorable hooks. More technical cuts, Lord Forgive Me, and the second part of the opener give Wigwe more space to flex his abilities as an MC, and they're by no means any less exhilarating. Destruction and Head to Hades are evidence enough of that. There's a contagious swagger to nearly every track, whether it comes in the form of money-raining chest puffing, like on Been Broke, or tongue-in-cheek eyebrow raising on Big Cap. The album concludes with a nice change of pace in the pensive Chopped It Up with Farouk, tying up running threads on religion, joy, and grief into the package embodied by Nwigwe the multi-hyphenate. Since an injury ended his football career at the University of North Texas, he's worn many hats, serving as a husband, father, and, based off his lyrics, an enthusiastic Christian, creating edutainment nonprofit Team Ginny to promote artistic outlets for the youth of his community, releasing music at a prolific rate, including his blunt and direct single addressing the killing of Breonna Taylor, which went viral, and catching the attention of NPR's Tiny Desk and Michelle Obama. His work is growing in notoriety elsewhere, too, evidenced by the star-studded features list on this record, a cosign from Southern hip-hop royalty in CeeLo Green, as well as appearances from other faces of the genre in 2 Chainz, Chamillionaire, and EarthGang, beef up Nwigwe's genre credentials. And speaking of features, Fat is all over this thing, making contributions to 6 tracks and proving she's every bit her husband's better half, as the saying goes. Her verse on Lord Forgive Me is a highlight, in which she echoes the tension inherent in living a godly life amidst the struggle, expressed by Mr. Nwigwe on his verse prior. Pharrell is here too, briefly lending his talents to the track's hook, while on Head to Hades, Royce da 5'9" delivers the couplet of the album with this name drop.
Them snakes exist and play a position like Kobe and D-Wade, old school 6'4" sitting in mid condition like Toby and Wigwe.
2022 has supplied no shortage of attitude and skill from its best rap records, but this one can go toe-to-toe with the best of them. Toby Nwigwe proves why we'd all do well to learn how to pronounce his name, and I'm looking forward to more sensational moments in his career moving forward. Some records demand a maturity on the part of the artist. For their 5th LP, veteran indie folk rock outfit Big Thief deliver with a double album, a sprawling 20-track cornucopia, sprawling in its over 70 minutes of runtime, and sprawling in its recording. The band held sessions in upstate New York, SoCal, the Colorado Rockies, and the hills of Tucson, Arizona, all in pursuit of encapsulating the many facets of lead vocalist Adrienne Lenker's songwriting and the band's sound. As such, it's a deceptively versatile record. Big Thief has had 4 albums to perfect their unique approach to indie folk, breaking through with 2020's UFO Friends, and Dragging New Warm Mountain runs the gamut from country rock to bedroom pop, pervaded by Lenker's adept lyricism, sometimes quaintly charming, other times deeply profound. It's their first record produced by drummer James Krivchenia, who does an impressive job behind the board in place of longtime collaborator Andrew Sarlo. Living up to his craft, the rhythm tracks on the huge-sounding Little Things and Flower of Blood envelop the mix, while the plucked percussion on Time Escaping is unexpected and playful. Lenker can be heard exclaiming during an instrumental break, reportedly a result of her puppy Oso sneaking into the booth during the final take and, naturally, requiring an explanation for all the noise. For her part, Lenker's contributions balance darkness and light, able to match the foggy, sinister production on Blurred View, as well as the fun and kitschy jaw harp on Spud Infinity, with those country vocal scoops and cutesy musings on Elbows and Garlic Bread. The fiddle on the latter track bolsters other more country-tinged numbers, like Red Moon, a product of longtime friend Matt Twain's appearance at the Tucson sessions. Even without that texture, some of the more bare mixes retain a rustic sound. These include guitar and vocal numbers like Dried Roses and Promise is a Pendulum, as well as Sparrow with its biblical imagery, and The Only Place, in which Lenker ponders love at the ends of existence. Certainty, 12,000 Lines, and closer Blue Lightning also flirt with that country sound. while Simulation Swarm, entrancing in its straightforward melody, and Love, 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 a drunken ramble of a song, find other ways to play at the intersection of folk and blues. I love the subtle vocal harmonies on Wake Me Up to Drive, as well as those on the plodding interlude experiment Heavy Bend. The album's opener, Changes, was allegedly captured in a single take, as engineer Dom Monks, who'd handled the job on their prior breakthrough record, UFO Friends, recorded their practice run-through and, before they could get a first real take in, let them know they'd already gotten a perfect one. And what a tone setter it is, definitely a highlight. The title track, as well, wraps you in a warm blanket with swirling production and Lenker's half-whispered vocals. The name comes from a lyric off her 2020 solo record, which reads, "Weren't we the stars of heaven? Weren't we the salt in the sea? Dragon in the new warm mountain, didn't you believe in me?" It seems as though this is an answer to that question, though I'm not sure how to take the meaning further than that. All the words start with the last letter of the previous word, is that anything? Maybe there's no reason. A song which at first seems to lament the world's apparent futility, especially in a socially distant context, but then finds comfort in the understanding that no logic is required of faith, making peace with life's transience. More than anything else, perhaps, that is the driving ethos of Lenker's songwriting on Dragon New Warm Mountain, and suffice to say, I believe in it. Two legends unite to prove beyond shadow of a doubt that they've still got the game on lock. Veteran MC extraordinaire Black Thought of the legendary Roots crew here teams up with Danger Mouse, the journeyman producer behind Crazy as one half of Gnarls Barkley, the Gorillaz album Demon Days, and the cult classic combination of Jay-Z and the Beatles on his unofficial remix release, The Grey Album. In recent years, he's mostly kept to the alternative rock scene. His last full hip-hop album dropped in 2005, The Mouse and the Mask, his collaboration with the late MF Doom under their Danger Doom moniker. For his part, Black Thought has kept active in the genre he may well call his kingdom, capping off a recent trilogy of solo releases in 2020. The two had laid the groundwork for what would become Cheat Codes, their first full-length collaboration, as early as 2017, but with Danger Mouse buried beneath a slew of other projects, and Thought tied up with his own records and the Roots Tonight Show obligations, it wasn't until the pandemic slowed things down that the work to finish the record could really ramp up. Opener Sometimes announces Danger Mouse's triumphant return to hip-hop with a dramatic, soulful instrumental, through which Black Thought pierces with his sharp, powerful delivery, bringing rhymes and flows accessible only to the best in the business. The following title track, as well as lead single No Gold Teeth, use these amped-up recurring figures in the beat that propel Thought's incomparable bars on his rhyming prowess. Saltwater, too, does a similar thing. I love the contrast between instrumental segments, not to mention a welcome guest verse from Conway the Machine, whose flow sits right there in the pocket with Black Thought. Strong features elevate The Darkest Part, Because, and Strangers too. Fellow veteran Raekwon the Chef matches Thought's skill, while the very capable Joey Badass and A$AP Rocky rise to the occasion with plenty of three-syllable rhymes themselves, not to mention both Run the Jewels verses adding to the flurry of punches on Strangers. Man, that track's got a great energy to it. Of course, Black Thought can handle a track all on his own, as he does on the more reserved Identical Deaths, Close to Famous, and the closer Violas and Lupitas. But my favorite of the bunch is Obama's pick of the litter, Belize, featuring a posthumous MF Doom verse that, given some of the references in his trademark mellifluous bars, likely came off the cutting room floor from the Mouse and the Mask sessions. I love this spellbinding instrumental. Those lazy horns, the ominous refrain, and the cascading figure that makes the track, for me, a smoky back lounge cousin to Freddie Gibbs and Madlib's iconic Thuggin'. Its companion, the subsequent Aquamarine, marks a climactic highlight of the record, owing to Black Thought's pontifical lyrics and a chorus courtesy of previous Danger Mouse collaborator Michael Kiwanuka. Ultimately, the record's appeal comes down to two artists not only at the top of their respective crafts individually, but whose chemistry takes the work to another level. Thought drops another rapper's career-best bar every 10 seconds on this thing, and Danger Mouse shows no rust as he puts together the best top-to-bottom sample-based instrumental effort of the year, and the two combined work off one another in enthralling fashion. It's easy to see why these two can prove theirs is the best in the game when they've played so long as to have all the cheat codes. It's an insidious tension at the heart of Ethel Cain's debut record, that between the toxicity of her roots and the familiar comforts that they provide. Growing up Baptist in rural Florida, she chafed against social and religious pressures as her adolescence started to expand beyond the cloistered community set forth by, among others, her father, the local deacon. But that same insularity nurtured her love for music, singing in the church choir with her mother, and instilled in her a reverence for the at once suffocating and tight-knit nature of her hometown, one which she unpacks with love and wry critique in equal measure on Preacher's Daughter. Cain thoroughly mines her personal experience for inspiration in crafting an ambitious project. The 75-minute concept album tells the 3-act story of her Cain character. As on the album's cover art, the specter of Christ looms large over the lyrics. From the many biblical allusions in the overarching narrative, to the frequent Christian turns of phrase in her songwriting, Jesus cannot escape his mother's blood, notes Cain on the opener, using religious language to introduce one of the album's primary themes, transgenerational trauma, while setting the stage for the production to come. We meet the character Ethel Cain in the single American Teenager, immersed in her world of NASCAR, rock and roll, and being the one who would change everything, where she unpacks the worldviews of her contemporaries with that biting wit. A House in Nebraska sees Cain pining for lost love, an extension of her paradoxical desire for the Baptist ideal. On Western Nights, Cain grapples with the current man in her life, whose abuse and violent antics she struggles to look past on behalf of her devotion. After he's killed, she flees, expressing a desire to be washed of sin and to take personal agency on Family Tree. Hard Times, a cathartic sigh of a song, laments her troubled attachment to troubled men, both yearning to be free but at the same time longing for connection. On Thoroughfare, Cain goes west, having met a traveler sympathetic to her plight, and the two partake in pleasures of the flesh, bringing us to the dark, hedonistic Gibson girl. Signs of Trouble, though, reach their climax on Ptolemaea, named for the circle of hell in Dante's Inferno, reserved for the traitoress, in which her newfound lover murders her. Sun-bleached Flies sees Cain's spirit reflect on her life and death, racked still with the tension between faith and freedom, mourning that she can't let go when something's broken. It's all I know, and it's all I want now. And now, her body, sitting in a California freezer while back home they search for her in vain, waits to be ultimately eaten by this cannibalistic stranger. Phew! There's a lot of meaning to unpack here, not least among which is the through line of this young woman who struggles to adhere to her preordained religious role before betraying her roots and setting out for the West, only for her odyssey to consume her before she can reconcile these two opposing yet conjoined halves of herself. It's a draining listen, matched by the power of Cain's music. These are long, languorous songs, stuffed with enough synths and guitars to fill stadiums. A plethora of influences, from Karen Carpenter to Gregorian chant, combine to color the record with shades of Americana, indie pop, ambient, drone, and metal music. No stone is left unturned, no moment wasted. Even the instrumentals August Underground and Televangelism, in which narratively the character is murdered and ascends to heaven, allow Cain to further experiment with her sonic palette and make a statement about the thinness of God-on-demand programming through her use of an old TV hiss. There's an illuminating quote I liked from a piece in W Magazine wherein Cain tells the interviewer, "I have my cross necklace on, and I have my American flag t-shirt on, and I'm not a huge fan of either of them. I think that's why I talk so much about it in my art, because it's easier to get the upper hand. I'm not going to get rid of you, so I might as well have this power over you." Such is the power and paradox of the Preacher's Daughter. It's been a good year for maximalism.
Idiots are infinite, and thinking men are numbered.
The third LP from virtuosic London rock band Black Midi is a thorny, chaotic, beguiling mess that's just oh so fun to dive into. There's just so much of it, at every conceivable level. So many instruments, so many textures, so many compositional quirks. Slice off any single second from this tight 40 minutes and a whole album's worth of sound is liable to come spilling out. Just look at the liner notes and you'll get a sense for how dense this thing is. Or look at the album art, which manages to visually capture the roiling chaos of the music it represents. But it's a remarkably controlled chaos, reined in by three masters of their respective crafts. Lead singer and guitarist Jordy Greep's vocals are intense, frenetic, and occasionally charismatic, giving the record its post-punk overtones with a delivery that's somehow both monotone and yet incredibly dynamic. Bassist Cameron Picton also sings lead on a few tracks, a smoother sort of David Gilmour compliment to Greep's Roger Waters. Last but certainly not least is drummer Morgan Simpson, who perhaps draws the toughest assignment of the bunch. Through a plethora of unconventional time signatures, on-a-dime tempo changes, and raucous fills, his anchoring presence behind the kit goes a long way in ensuring the music stays taut, yet firmly attached to the rails off which it threatens to fly. Hellfire begins, naturally, with dissonant piano stings atop a military snare pattern, appropriate given the material to follow, on the title track, before Greep christens the mic with a barrage of sardonic lyrics on futility and impotence. A ring announcer brings us into track 2, Sugar Tzu, in which Greep provides a first-person account of a gonzo boxing match in the distant future. The track exemplifies the stark and abrupt dynamic contrasts, which will continue to liven up the dense compositions on later numbers, as well as introduces us to a lovely recurring saxophone texture. I love how the face-melting arpeggios bounce back and forth, the two boxers trading blows in the ring before Greep shoots one in the back. After the track erupts to a close, the next snarls open. Eat Men Eat is the first to feature the softer lead vocals from Picton, but with lyrics no less harsh, imagining a perverse mind in the depths of the underworld. Welcome to Hell continues with the grotesque imagery, this time accompanied by the strongest groove on the record. Greep regales us with the story of Private Tristan Bongo, a soldier suffering from PTSD, overwhelmed by horrific memories of war that seep into a similarly frenzied night out on the town. The track's momentum leads directly into the second Picton-led cut, Still, opening with slide guitars as the band adds country to a growing list of genre influences that already includes jazz fusion, math rock, and post-punk among others. Its placid moments make for a welcome respite from the cacophony which has defined the album thus far, before the interlude halftime leads us into Act 2, which begins with the record's main chorus, the 7-minute behemoth, The Race is About to Begin. Here we find familiar characters from the first half of Hellfire engrossed in a horse race, which ensnares bettors into a spiral of gambling addiction, permeated throughout by musical and lyrical interjections that flesh out the heinous world in which the record has delighted. On Dangerous Liaisons, a farmhand is enticed by a mobster to carry out a gruesome killing before being dragged by the devil himself into eternal damnation. The defense flips to the other side of Satan's coin, as a detestable brothel owner advertises his wares in a devilishly tongue-in-cheek manner. Hellfire concludes with 27 Questions, a King Crimson-esque piece centered around the hot ticket in town, as an audience of royalty and beggars alike pack the theater to see the swan song of Freddie Frost. His onstage death, a hellish vaudevillian spectacle, is preceded by a clever list of questions which indulge in the sneering paradox and contradiction present throughout the record. Hellfire's sonic palette is overflowing with lushly orchestrated and sharply accented elements of 1,000 different origins. It makes sense that producer Marta Saloni worked with Bjork before handling a project of this scale. But it's the inventive, garish songwriting and vibrant point of view that elevates the record beyond a tedious exercise in virtuosity. Though I don't know if I could call anything these guys do tedious, they are eminently proficient performers. It's a challenging listen, but if you brave one out-of-left-field record from this list, make it this one. I'll be finding new things in these mixes on the 100th listen and beyond, delighting in this detestable cast of characters bound for Hellfire Eternal.
Good driver.
I'll be honest, I'd never really bought into the shtick of one Abel Tesfaye. The eminent Canadian crooner has built an enigmatic brand, charting a nihilistic, hedonistic way forward for R&B over the past decade with remarkable pop crossover success. His signature falsetto, set atop hazy, nocturnal beats, has found a reliable base in what I'll call the Euphoria generation. Those poor, poor souls born in the shadow of 9/11, cursed with such a depressing, hopeless future that they've just gotta do Molly about it. Suffice to say, I found the whole vibe a touch melodramatic. But with the After Hours album cycle, particularly his performance at Super Bowl 55, I was forced to reckon with The Weeknd's now sizable stable of hits. Tracks like Earned It and I Can't Feel My Face deftly distill pop songwriting to its purest form, and the smash sensation Blinding Lights continues to wow me with its eternal quality, as if the song had existed for all time, just waiting for someone to discover it. For me, The Weeknd is, at his best, a pure pop artist, and in this way Dawn FM, his 5th studio album, puts his best foot forward while looking to past masters for guidance. True to form, it's a concept album, imagining a sort of radio station purgatory, easing listeners through their transition to the afterlife with the help of Jim Carrey. The 103.5 frequency nods to a dance-heavy station in Tesfaye's hometown of Toronto, portending the dance-oriented music to come, and let me tell you, this thing starts out with a 7-track run that can go toe-to-toe with just about any such opening stretch to come out this year. After some brief table setting from Tesfaye and Carey on the intro comes Gasoline, a propulsive aperitif, followed by the massive, reverberating synths on the chorus of How Do I Make You Love Me that begin the real meat of the record. Dawn FM is as much a synth-pop record as it is dance music, and the tracklist is smartly sequenced right down to the transitions. As the 4 on the Floor kick eases us out of How Do I Make You Love Me, nobody has to leave the dance floor as the red carpet is rolled out for lead single Take My Breath, building anticipation until an incredibly gratifying first verse entrance. There's a little bit of blinding lights here in the pop songwriting fundamentals, courtesy of Swedish songwriter extraordinaire Max Martin, marking the 4th album on which he's collaborated with Tesfaye. But the primary influence, the pop stalwart that looms large over this record, is Michael Jackson, made clear by album highlight Sacrifice. Straight away, that guitar, synth, vocal chop, you know, the funky thing. Makes for an absolutely diesel hook, and it anchors the track right through those descending pre-chorus chords, which have always connoted the theatricality of Thriller for me. For his part, Tesfaye wears Jackson on his sleeve, from cribbing his style in the music video to A Tale by Quincy, a well-placed interlude in which testimonials from industry maven Quincy Jones ponder the legendary producer's personal struggles and how those may have colored his prolific relationship with a similarly troubled young Michael. The flowery instrumental brings the record's temperature down to a simmer, leading directly into the album's first real jam, Out of Time. Tesfaye laments lost love over a Japanese city pop sample, but when it comes to unpacking the lyrics on Dawn FM, we have to reckon with the Swedish songwriter syndrome. Martin understands the form better than most, and his credentials are undeniable, but there is a tendency for some of his lyrics to, under scrutiny, prove insubstantial, or even nonsensical. I'm hardly impressed by the prose on a lot of these tracks, and they're far less insightful into the mysterious Weeknd persona as compared with some of his early work. But when the choruses soar like these do and the hooks abound, they're winners regardless. It's not Shakespeare, but aesthetically it gets the job done. Alas, the back half can't compete, in my view, with that opening run, but that doesn't mean there aren't bright spots to keep you listening. While I'm disappointed by the uninspired melody and Tyler's lackluster contribution on Here We Go Again, Best Friends is an agreeable synth-pop cut, and Is There Someone Else comes through with arguably the strongest chorus in the second act. Starry Eyes allows Abel some space to flex his vocals, even if it lacks structure, and the following Every Angel is Terrifying experiments sonically while fleshing out the album's concept with some cheeky, materialistic advertising interjections. Josh Safdie makes a contribution here, with whom Abel worked on the film Uncut Gems, in which he makes an auspicious cameo. Don't Break My Heart, I Heard You're Married, and Less Than Zero are above-average bops, and while it's not quite up to the high standard Lil Wayne has set for himself on guest verses, over the past couple years at least, I do enjoy the bit he does with movie titles here. The record ties everything up on Phantom Regret with the soothing tones of Mr. Carey, who I understand to have written the poem that concludes the album himself. That's nice. Again, there's that nagging voice in the back of my head that finds the aesthetics tend to obscure any kind of thesis here, but maybe that's appropriate for this project. At any rate, I really do enjoy the track. It's certainly better than Riz Ahmed's verse on the Bastille album this year. Overall, Abel Tesfaye comes through with a focused and smartly constructed pop record which revitalizes the sounds of past masters in a manner all his own. I'm glad to have at last been won over by a Weeknd project, and whatever comes of this trilogy we're in the midst of, I suspect I will be tuning to 103.5 Dawn FM many more times in the future. And now, before we get to number 1, some honorable mentions.
Sitting at this party.
3 years after Wise Blood's Titanic Rising found a favorite in myself and many others, singer-songwriter Natalie Merring is back with her signature contralto nestled amidst lush and ethereal instrumentation. The first 2 tracks start off the record with a sharp lyrical focus on the contemporary ennui, something of which she proved more than capable on that 2019 record. I didn't love quite enough of Hearts Aglow's 10 tracks for it to crack this year's list, but I want to take a moment to shout out Twin Flame. While I could listen to those gorgeous string arrangements all day, taking musical inspiration from Wherever I Lay My Hat, That's My Home is a step in a new and perfectly viable artistic direction for Merring, in my view. Denzel Curry refuses to settle, as the prolific young MC again proves himself one of the most exciting in the game. For whatever reason, this just didn't click with me like I'd hoped, but I respect the effort all the same. Of note, Curry released a deluxe version of Melt My Eyes featuring tracks backed by his Cold Blooded Soul band, which he unveiled during their performance at the NPR Tiny Desk, and man, what a great idea this is. I love hearing talented MCs vibe with a live instrumental, and I would welcome more of this on future projects, from Denzel or anybody. Control remains a bona fide classic of my adolescence, and I was far from alone in patiently waiting the 5 years it took Solana Rowe to follow it up. I guess then I can't complain about the nearly 70 minutes of music that she eventually delivered. Or can I? SOS is far from a failure, but I feel it lacks the focus, musically and lyrically, that made for such a tight 2017 breakthrough. Another thing, I loved Shirt when it was first teased during lockdown in that Grey Goose performance, but boy does the studio version sap the intrigue and dramatic contrast those horn hits provide in the live recording. This year, Pusha T put out a highly proficient hip-hop album about selling coke. It's good, but I'll admit it's hard to be over the moon for it when it's such familiar territory. That's not necessarily a knock on his craft, though. As he says to Sean Evans in his interview on Hot Ones,
I am like the Martin Scorsese of like street raps. Scorsese gives you The Departed, Goodfellas, and a host of other joints. And you never say, hey, I want him to make a love story. That's how I want you to look at me rap-wise.
So I'll compromise and give It's Almost Dry an honorable mention.
The mercenary don't fight the war for free. They fight the war for a currency, not unity, not peace. Bookkeepers.
There's a young lady out here that's pretty dope, by the name of Lil Sims. I don't know if y'all heard of her.
Yes, we've been supporting Lil Sims hard.
Yeah, Lil Sims. She might be the illest doing it right now.
British MC Little Sims follows up her breakout critical darling Sometimes I Might Be Introvert with this shorter but no less polished project, proving again she's got bars and a full orchestra to back them up. I'd love to see her switch up the flow a little more on future projects, but glad she's keeping up the good work and staying sharp.
Yeah. Tell me who really wanted everything.
It's incredibly self-conscious, as Logic records so often are, but the boy from G-Berg surprised me with this endearing love letter to the genre's past masters.
Free in the knowledge that one day this will end.
This is mostly here on the strength of my affinity for Radiohead. It doesn't reach the heights of the band's main canon, but it's among the more consistent of their side projects. I also want to quickly throw these up here that I felt deserved some recognition, before last but certainly not least, honoring 4 follow-ups to debuts that I loved. Lizzo comes through with a record chock full of self-love and affirmations, and while I don't think she matches the attitude and abundant high points on 'Cause I Love You, she seems like she's in a good place and I couldn't be happier for her come-up. Plus the disco grooves on About Damn Time and Everybody's Gay are undeniable.
I'm screwed from a past life, and that's why I lost you.
The heir to the Macy's fortune wowed me with her 2019 indie pop rock debut, Cheap Queen, and this most recent release makes for an agreeable sophomore effort that nearly matches the strength of its predecessor. Although I wasn't as keen on anything here as much as some tracks off her eponymous debut, Rina Sawayama continues to push the boundaries of pop on Hold the Girl. She, with Charlie XCX, seem intent on revitalizing late aughts, early 2010s electro-pop aesthetics, a wave I'm sure will take off in a big way before the decade is through. Just kidding, it's already happening.
Y'all sing.
After nearly 25 years, the mythic second LP from conscious hip-hop legends Black Star and crate digger extraordinaire Madlib has finally arrived on the podcast app Luminary. I wish I had more to say about the actual content of this album, but the story here has unfortunately become more about the distribution. I understand Bey and Quelly's frustrations with the corrupt industry, but I wish there'd been an option to at least purchase a physical copy, even if at a premium. If nothing else, take this opportunity to listen to their 1998 debut. It's an all-timer. And now, all that's left is...
Number one.
I spent a lot of time listening to music that came out this year, but I spent even more listening to albums that came out in years past, and in so doing I learned a lot about the history of Western popular music over the last near century, and how it might inform our current moment. In the 60s, intrepid artists processed national conflicts through their art, but a hard 1970s helped grease the works for a more escapist approach. Consumers turned away from the economic downturn outside their window and cherished the precious moments of unbridled happiness that could be found on the dance floor. After the housing market crashed in 2008, artists that defined the sound of my youth, like the Black Eyed Peas, used similar electropop aesthetics to provide a respite from life's hardships. Which is better then? Escape or confrontation? It's an impossible question, but the album at number 1 on this list gives an answer that draws on a rich musical tradition to advance an already historic career into a somehow even brighter future. Beyonce Carter Knowles is, undeniably, a renowned cultural force that needs no introduction. It's odd to me, then, that her 7th studio album, Renaissance, positions itself as a rebirth when her successes have only grown in number and magnitude this past decade. Without getting too bogged down in the personal drama, I'm sure this is Queen Bee decidedly moving on from the Lemonade news cycle once and for all. Now, I usually recoil from tabloid-tinged behind-the-scenes stuff, but I won't lie. Lemonade was my first substantial entry point to Bey's catalog, and her artful airing of Dirty Laundry was incredibly compelling. So much so that I dove deep into her past records and finally got hip to what critics and the Bey Hive alike had been preaching for years. Following up on a best-of-the-decade contender like Lemonade was never going to be easy, but her 2019 cover of Before I Let Go, with its pitch-perfect HBCU horn band textures and driving influence from New Orleans bounce, suggested to me that Beyonce's best may yet lie before her. And in summer of 2022,
Let it begin.
she blessed us with an hour of meticulously crafted dance music that comes club-ready straight out the box. The sequencing on this thing is immaculate, as clever transitions nimbly move us through the tracklist without ever having to stop the party. The start and stop opener, I'm That Girl, establishes Beyonce's bona fides, self-assuredly introducing us to themes of hedonism and escapism to come. Next, Cozy incorporates reggaeton rhythms to deliver a danceable self-love anthem with sharp confidence, and it's far from the last time we'll hear Afro-Latino influences on this record. The decadent flexing on the chorus hook of Alien Superstar invites us to live vicariously through Beyonce's unique excellence atop a pounding, soaring instrumental. By interpolating I'm Too Sexy, she lands the first of multiple blows to Drake, who far less convincingly flipped the same sample last year, and whose own 2022 Dance Pivot album would have been among the most high-profile flops of the year if it weren't so forgettable.
I feel like
Cuff It, the second single, features co-writing credit from disco pioneer Nile Rodgers, and his signature guitar patterns along with foregrounded bass make this groove sparkle. The track moves smoothly into Energy, with a contribution from Caribbean singer Beam and production from Pharrell Williams, which is itself a prelude to lead single Break My Soul. Here is the defining theme of the album exemplified: dance as a means of resilience in the face of great struggle. The driving 4-on-the-floor beat and just familiar enough sample from Robin S.'s house classic Show Me Love make effective use of musical tropes, while bounce icon Big Frida's inclusion touches on another element of the record. As Renaissance is enamored with past masters, it celebrates the integral role of black and queer artists on the genres and styles it advances. When the album leans on disco and bounce, when it borrows lyrics from phrases forged in queer spaces, it's providing a euphoric escape for us all, but particularly for those marginalized groups for whom the struggle is felt tenfold. Church Girl echoes that same message of resilience over an instrumental that carries Beyonce's soulful early sound into a modern trap setting. Next comes A Moment to Breathe, with the warm, delicate Plastic Off the Sofa, a virtuosic album highlight. I adore the synchronized runs in the bass and vocals, and that one lick sounds straight off a Jacob Collier record. It certainly doesn't hurt that the track rolls out the red carpet for what I feel confident calling my pick for Song of the Year, Virgo's Groove. From the preeminent Virgo herself comes this 6-minute feast of expertly produced funk goodness, delighting in the immediacy of the moment, the pinnacle of the bliss to be found on Beyonce's dance floor. Groove says it all, as that thick, twangy bass line and swirling surrounding textures that drop in and out at precisely the right moments make it impossible for me not to bob my head to the beat every time it comes on. The track never feels its length, as it continuously finds new yet cohesive ways of reinventing itself from segment to segment, from the sultry bridge through the incomparable vocal runs that close us out. Moving on, Move marks another track that wears its Afro-Caribbean roots on its sleeve, doubling down on the proud, confident attitude that has colored previous tracks before mellowing out in its second half. Heated, too, makes prominent use of that popular dembow rhythm, proving that her deep cuts can outdo Drake's biggest hits. He's actually credited as a songwriter on this, but I have a suspicion that's owing to the little descending triplet figure, which I guess is being credited as a sample? Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but at the very least it screams Drake to me.
You owe me a dumpling, I mean it, I won't forget.
Beyonce tears through the end of the track with ferocious attitude before moving into Thick, which, I'll be honest, I wanted to like much more than I do. For me, Tempo by Lizzo does the job way better. But All Up in Your Mind skillfully steers back towards trap aesthetics, and the mesmerizing pre-chorus harmonies on America Has a Problem are a welcome consolation, even if the title baited more than a few conscious listeners into expecting something more activism-oriented, like Lemonade's Freedom. The two-headed penultimate track, Pure/Honey, keeps the 4 on the floor beat pounding before making a sharp turn into classic Beyonce harmonies as it transitions into its more melodic second half. I swear that is a nod to the hook on Prince's. And although it's nowhere in the credits, it's hard not to believe there's a connection given how read up on its history the record is. And speaking of well-read, the closer, Summer Renaissance, pays homage to the Queen of Disco, Donna Summer, whose work with Giorgio Moroder helped to define the genre. And here too, Beyonce's reworking of Summer's influential hit, I Feel Love, is a highlight. The pulsating groove and Beyonce's contagious attitude, plus those enveloping vocals on the pre-chorus and the thrilling send-off on the bridge, put a bow on these 62 minutes, each and every instantaneous moment of which feels like it was given hours of care and attention to detail. The production, the writing, the performances, everything is firing on all cylinders as it shepherds past sounds into an uncertain future. With political unrest simmering and a possible recession on the horizon, there's a lot going on today to make folks seek refuge in music and dance. Of course, Beyonce is far from claiming that an album drop can solve the world's problems, but with Renaissance, she's brought downtrodden and marginalized voices some sense of rebirth, rekindling the belabored spirit in all of us by doing what she does best, making the best album of the year. Phew, that was a lot. I hope you've enjoyed, and if you haven't already, I hope you'll consider checking out some of these albums. In many cases, I feel, the music speaks for itself, and in most every case, it's better than anything I've just said about it. If you want a sampling of the top 10, I've created a Spotify playlist with some of my favorite music from the albums on this year's list, 2 tracks apiece. Feel free to check that out. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these records or any other musical highlights from 2022, so hit me up or hit the comments section. Thanks for listening.
7 días me or mine. You could keep the feast in mind. I just want my peace of mind. Oh yes, so it happens. Go from FOMO to Afro, wasteful Dr. Manhattan. Present the elegance of pain, the posture for passion, the rebirth.